A hound it was, an enormous coal-black hound, but not such a hound as mortal eyes have ever seen. Fire burst from its open mouth, its eyes glowed with a smoldering glare, its muzzle and hackles and dewlap were outlined in flickering flame. Never in the delirious dream of a disordered brain could anything more savage, more appalling, more hellish be conceived than that dark form and savage face which broke upon us out of the wall of fog. Dr. Watson in Arthur Conan Doyle's book, The Hound of the Baskervilles. For centuries, witnesses throughout the British Isles have reported seeing spectral black dogs. These dogs are said to be large in size with a semi-ghostly appearance and glowing red eyes like burning coal. These hound-like apparitions are associated with isolated crossroads, churches, and sites of execution. Many have speculated that these dogs are servants of the devil and harbingers of death, and that the mere sight of these creatures is enough to fill one with dread. However, others have reported these dogs acting as guardians of sorts, protecting those in danger. Tonight we look at all the theories of the mysterious black dogs on this episode of Snipe Hunt. Welcome to Snipe Hunt Frightening Folklore. I'm your host, Darren Young. In these minisodes, I cover topics that don't quite have enough content to do a full episode on, but they are just as interesting. I have decided that for these minisodes, I'm going to present them a little more seriously than I do subjects in full episodes, just something to make them a little different. But if the opportunity for a joke presents itself, I will not hesitate to make one. I just can't help myself. So without further ado, let's jump into tonight's subject. Before I get into the historical accounts, I would like to share my own experience, if it can even be called that. I had a dream when I was very little, one that has stuck with me to this day. I remember every detail of the dream very vividly. I was standing in the front yard of my home at the time. It was very overcast, with barely any light showing through the gray clouds. Across the road from my yard was a heavily wooded area, and in the darkness of the trees were many pairs of glowing red eyes staring directly at me. At this point of the dream I felt fear. I couldn't move or cry out for help. Soon, the eyes exited out of the trees and took on the forms of black wolves or dogs. They seemed to be made out of pitch black smoke. The pack started running at me, snarling and barking as they came. I braced myself for an attack, but none came. The dogs were running in a circle around me. Their fangs were bared, and the glow from their eyes trailed behind them as they ran around me, but they no longer seemed to see me. Then everything went silent, and I woke up. Being very young at the time, I probably ran to my parents' room to look for comfort after my nightmare. Now I think it's odd that I had a dream about paranormal creatures that I didn't even know existed in folklore until many years later. But it is very possible that I watched something that featured monsters similar to the ones I experienced in my dream. The dogs do seem like something that would be shown in the 1985 animated movie, The Black Cauldron. But given tonight's subject, I thought it was too interesting not to share. Black dogs are associated with death. The lore states that when these entities are seen, death is not far behind. There are even rumors that the dying see these black dogs right before they pass. Now these creatures have many names depending on the region they are spotted in. Just to demonstrate how widespread the myth is, I will name a few of the nicknames assigned to it. Maybe you will recognize, or at least be amused by one of these nicknames. Black Shuck, Barghest, Freybug, Gabriel Hound, Gert Dog, Guy Trash, Harry Jack, Padfoot, and Skriker or Screaker. Let's focus in on Black Shuck, the word shuck coming from the Old English shuka, which means demon. Black Shuck is said to roam the countryside of East Anglia, and other accounts coming from Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire, and Essex in the British Isles. The account of the Black Dog of Bungay is attributed to Black Shuck. HistoricMysteries.com describes the event. Perhaps the most piteous and disconcerting of hellhound accounts took place in the little town of Bungay in Suffolk, England, back in the 16th century. On Sunday, August 4th, 1577, a terrible thunderstorm broke out in the town of Bungay, a storm best describable with the adjectives darkness, rain, hail, thunder, and lightning, as was never seen the like. The puny thatched cottages of the helpless townsfolk were fiercely swiped away in its rage. And so the incapable country people, hoping that only a miracle could save them, knelt at the St. Mary's Church, the religious heart of the town. As they prayed for help, while the appearance of a beautiful angel with charming white wings would have been more appropriate for the situation, what fate had decided was completely different. Lightning struck the church, and what appeared before its doors was a gigantic black hound, its bloodthirsty fangs vehement to be pierced against the tender flesh of its prey. What happened afterwards is described in the following olden verse. All down the church in the midst of fire, the hellish monster flew, and passing onward to the choir, he many people slew. Instead of being scared to death by the holy might of the church, the Diablo simply dashed in, tearing off people's throats and strangling worshippers with its front paws. Such heat radiated from the foul physique of the beast that it instantaneously vaporized anyone nearby. Then, after satisfying its appetite with the horrified screams of the masses, the dog suddenly disappeared, reappearing 12 miles farther in the Blytheburg Church, where it resumed its brutal activities, ripping the lives out of innocent victims. While most will be content with merely hearing such a nerve-wracking tale, more serious people will be craving for evidence. Here's to their satisfaction. The records of the St. Mary's Church show that a huge thunderstorm did break out on the said date, and 2 people were killed at the belfry. However, there is no further elaboration as to the circumstances and cause of their death. However, the Blytheburg Church wins the day as it boasts several scratches made on the north entrance, allegedly by the claws of the same black dog. So it seems that historical records do back up the account, but whether or not a hellhound really did slaughter people in the St. Mary's Church, we will never know for sure. As mentioned before, these spectral canines are sometimes viewed as benevolent protectors. This can be seen in the folklore of the Church Grim. The Demonic Paradise Wiki describes the entity. The Church Grim is a figure from English and Scandinavian folklore, said to be an attendant spirit, overseeing the welfare of its particular church. English church grims are said to enjoy loudly ringing the bells. They may appear as black dogs, even as other animals such as rams, horses, roosters, or ravens, or as small, misshapen, dark-skinned people. The Swedish church grim are said to be the spirits of animals sacrificed by early Christians at the building of a new church. In parts of Europe, including Britain and Scandinavia, it was believed that the first man buried in the churchyard had to guard it against the devil. To save a human soul from the duty, a completely black dog would be buried alive on the north side of the churchyard, creating a guardian spirit, the church grim, to protect the church. Hellhounds are prevalent in European mythology, and these might be the origin of the modern black dog specters of Britain. Cerberus from Greek mythology is definitely the most famous of all hellhounds. He is the multi-headed guardian of the gates of Hades. Then from Norse mythology we have the great hound Garmr, a blood-covered wolf who guards Hell's Gate and is associated with Ragnarok. Another possible origin is the Cunanún from Welsh mythology. These were hounds of Annwn, an otherworld of paradise in Welsh mythology, similar to what heaven is to Christianity. These Cunanún and other hellhounds are often associated with the Wild Hunt, a ghostly group of hunters in pursuit of unknown prey. Depending on the region, the lore states that the hunting party is comprised of elves, fairies, or even the dead. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, one of the earliest histories of the Anglo-Saxons, records the following event as to having happened in CE 1127. Let no one be surprised at what we are about to relate, for it is common gossip up and down the countryside. That is, after February 6, many people both saw and heard a whole pack of huntsmen in full cry. They straddled black horses and black bucks, while their hounds were pitch black with staring, hideous eyes. This was seen in the very deer park of Peterborough town, and all the woods stretching from the same spot as far as Stamford. All through the night, monks heard them sounding and winding their horns. Reliable witnesses who kept watch in the night declared that there might have well been 20 or even 30 of them in this wild tantivy as near as they could tell. So the legend of the Wild Hunt may get its very own episode, but for now we'll stick with Black Dog. Central America has its own ghostly black dog known as El Cadejo. There are 2 types of these beings, the white Cadejo, who acts as a guardian angel and helps the inebriated find their way home, and the black Cadejo, who is a hellhound who steals the souls of its habitually drunk victims. The Black Cadejo is described as a large, shaggy black dog with glowing red eyes and hooves. It is said to be the devil incarnate, and is accompanied by the smell of sulfur and the feeling of dread. The origin of the Cadejo legend might stem from the Aztec deity Xolotl. Xolotl was a deity associated with lightning and death. Xolotl's portrayal as a dog is believed to stem from the Aztec belief that dogs guided the souls of the dead to the underworld. Another aspect I found interesting that might tie this deity to the Cadejo is that Xolotl is the god of twins. Xolotl's brother is Quetzalcoatl, who represents light and life, while Xolotl represents darkness and death. Very similar to the two types of Cadejo, one good and one evil. What makes this legend really stand out is the apparition's apparent connection to alcohol. So much there is a beer company named after this legend, Cadejo Brewing. Now that we know some of the history behind these spectral hounds, let's hear some more modern encounters. An unnamed woman experienced an encounter when she was a child at the height of World War II, as described by author G. McEwen in his book, Mystery Animals of Britain and Ireland. My encounter took place one afternoon in summer, when I had been sent to bed but was far from sleepy. I was sitting at the end of the big rest bedstead, playing with the ornamental knobs and looking out the window, when I was aware of a scratching noise, and an enormous black dog had walked from the direction of the fireplace on my left. It had passed around the end of the bed, between me and the window, round the other corner of the bed towards the door. As the dog passed between me and the window, it swung its head around to stare at me. It had very large, very red eyes, which glowed from inside as if lit up, and as it looked at me, I was quite terrified, and very much aware of the creature's breath, which was warm and strong as a gust of wind. The animal must have been very tall, as I was sitting on the old-fashioned bedstead, which was quite high, and our eyes were level. Funnily enough, by the time it reached the door, it had vanished. I assure you that I was wide awake at the time, and sat quite some long time wondering what I had seen, and to be truthful, too scared to get into bed, under the covers, and go to sleep. I clearly remember my mother and our host sitting in the garden in the late sun, and hearing the ringing of the bell on the weekly fried fish van from Birmingham as it went through the village. I am sure I was not dreaming, and I've never forgotten the experience, remembering to the last detail how I felt, and what the dog looked like. This encounter reminds me of sleep paralysis and could be a hallucination caused by the condition, although the witness is adamant that this encounter was not a dream. For our final encounters, we will listen to an excerpt from Animal Planet's short-lived series, Animal X.
For some, they're protective creatures. For others, an omen of death. They've even been described as a manifestation of the devil. Whatever their purpose, the phantom black dogs of Britain have appeared in many shapes and forms. 400 years ago, a demon black dog was even blamed for killing 5 people as they prayed in a church. Not surprisingly, these phantom beasts have left an indelible impression on anyone who sighted them.
The further back you go in time, the stranger the dog becomes. It has one eye, 2 eyes, it howls, it drags a chain. It takes many guises.
The red fiery eyes were the things that stuck in her memory more than anything.
I think it was a ghost, which a lot of people have seen round here. I think that my sister and I saw it that night.
Animal X travelled to East Anglia in Britain, where the legend of the black dog, or Old Shuck, has its strongest roots, and where it's still seen today. We met up with this man, Ivan Bunn, a folklore expert who's collected more than 100 reported sightings of the ghostly canines. One of his most fascinating cases involves a coast guard at a beach in Norfolk. Graham Grant was on duty at dawn 25 years ago when he noticed a huge black dog with a shaggy coat walking along the sand. He said it appeared to be searching for something, not like an ordinary dog, but as though it had a higher purpose. Its paranormal origin was confirmed when it disappeared into thin air.
He's convinced that it vanished. He says if it had run off into the sea or up onto the sand dunes, then he would have seen it go, and he didn't. And as a trained observer, I suppose we have to accept the story that he told.
At the time, Graham Grant didn't consider the dog to be evil, but later another Coast Guard told him that what he'd seen was a legendary phantom black dog, considered to be a harbinger of doom. Old Shuck soon lived up to its reputation. According to a report from Mr. Grant, shortly after the sighting, his colleague died suddenly at work. Then, just weeks after he told the ghostly tale to his father, he also died unexpectedly of a heart attack.
There's a very old tradition that should you see what you think is a phantom black dog, then you should never tell anybody for a year and a day. If you do tell anybody, then that's when the evil befalls you.
So what are people really seeing when they witness these apparitions? There are many explanations. They could just be normal black dogs, or hellhounds, or hallucinations that stem from mankind's long and complex relationship with canines. Sightings of large black cats have often been reported being seen in the British Isles as well. Maybe a large cat was the culprit of one of these encounters. Of course, alien large cats are a different subject altogether. It is difficult to determine if these dogs are known animals, cryptids, or supernatural in nature. It could be a combination of all three. I will let you decide. That's it for this minisode of Snipe Hunt. All audio used was done so under the protection of fair use. If you like the show, please rate it on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. Ratings are really appreciated and help grow the show. If you have any questions or any stories that you would like to share, please email us at snipehuntpodcast@gmail.com. Visit us on social media, and once again, thanks for listening. The legend of black dogs is one that is prevalent in most of the Western world, both as harbingers of death and as protectors. Maybe it is just an animal or even a trick of the mind, but once one hears a deep growl in the darkness and sees glowing red eyes, a man can only think that a hellhound is here for his soul, and that is definitely frightening folklore. The ambient music for this episode was provided in part by Nature World 1986.
Thank you so much for listening to Snipe Hunt. Your listening has been noted and will be reported with proper authorities. Please follow us on social media. If you have a question, comment, or a suggestion for a future episode, you can email us at snipehuntpodcast@gmail.com.
Logo design is by Ethan Rothfuss. All music heard, with the exception of the intro and outro, is by Kevin McLeod at Incompetech.com and Miu at DarkPiano.com. Possible tracks played include Crypto, Day of Chaos, Evening of Chaos, and Static Motion. Once again, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next hunt.